Some announcements before I actually start the character design presentation meeting is first, our end of quarter contest is next week. It's on Friday, March 6th. So if you're interested in getting any of the prize books that are written up on the screen, like we're giving away Frankenstein, Bad Guys 2, Monster Hunter Wild, and I think 2 other art books. So if you really want to get those art books for free, make sure to go into the contest. And another announcement is that the World Building Project is going to be wrapping up soon. So anyone who's participating in the project, make sure you remember that your next checkpoint is on March 14. That's for your final layout. And to anyone who's not participating in World Building Project and are interested in what the people that are in it are doing, you can always look into our Instagram page and see some of the highlighted submissions that the people in our club has made. So yeah. Anyway, so what is character design? It seems pretty clear that it's designing a character, but what is designing character really? And so a character, when you look up the meaning in like Google or any other search program, it's the mental and moral qualities distinctive to an individual, and only the second meaning is that it means a person in a novel, play, or movie. And so I just want you guys to see this and have it in your mind, put into perspective that character design is more about communicating the internal world of a person than it is about external visuals. Because I know a lot of people, when you like character design, you're like, I want this character to look cool, I want this character to look pretty, I want it to look interesting, unique, and all these other things. But a lot of times when I meet people, they sometimes forget to really delve into what the internal qualities of the characters are. Whenever I see a really cool character and I would like, hey, I want to know more about this character, can you tell me all about it? And then I would like ask specific questions like, oh, why do they have this gear? Did they write something? And a person would usually answer with, oh, I just think it looks cool. Sometimes characters like that do look cool, but if you really think about it, characters that really stay with you throughout your entire life are characters that are fully grounded and written beautifully in terms of personality, strengths, weaknesses, complexity on who they are as a person before you remember how they look like. And so this is just something that you need to remember when you're going into designing your characters, because the internal world of your characters is important for you to go into the next step, which is deciding what they look like. And so if you're interested in character design, I do feel like it's a responsibility to tell you guys that it is a very hard job to get into. It is because if you really consider it, any project, whether it be film, animation, or games, there are only a limited amount of characters that you can design. However, if you compare it to the amount of environment, props, and weapons that you need to design, all those things are countless. There's a lot of them that you can design, and therefore a project would need way more prop designers and environment designers than they do need character designers. That's why character designers are usually hired internally by a company or by a studio, and usually goes into senior artists more than them hiring for just a character designer. And so some things that you can look into if you really do feel like you want to be a character artist, other than exploring other job opportunities like being a background artist first or a prop artist first, is you can look into character illustrator, which goes into like book illustration, poster illustrations, and stuff like that. You can, if you're a 3D art, if you want to look into 3D artists or 3D tech more, you can also be a character modeler if you feel like you're really strong in your anatomy, or if that's something that interests you. You can be a character texture artist, which are just people who are focused in texturing a character model. And you can be a character splash artist, but it is more on illustrative style, so you don't really design the character. You just take the character design and then make a splash art for that. And for all of you that don't know what a splash art is when you play a game and there's like this really beautiful character illustration that's like really hyper rendered. That's what a splash art is. So if you really like rendering as well, I suggest you also look into that, because it's a much more needed job than character designers. And so what is character design part 2? So like I said, it's all about creating the person. And so a lot goes into creating a person. Character design, if you're interested in it, is that you will find yourself being interested in the human psyche, the human psychology, sociology, history, and more. It's because all of these things matter to a person, to a human being, is where do they live? What are the politics going on around them? What is the environment like? What are the people around them acting like? And so all these things go into what creates a person. And so if you find yourself interested in this thing, I feel like you're on the right track to being a character designer. And if you aren't, I feel like maybe search up some of these things more, because I feel like this is a very interesting topic to look into. And if you're very knowledgeable in these sort of things, it will really help you in deciding certain things about your character. And once again, internal, it's much more important to decide first before you go into the external qualities. And here are some things that I feel like some people don't really know about is that different industry on character design needs different requirements. And so game animation and live action character design are, oh my God, are three different things. And so some of you might be like, I saw this video on Instagram that talks about like shape exaggeration, blah blah. But then I also saw another character design from a game that I really like, and they don't really have any shape exaggeration, but it's called good character design. Why is that the case? And so it's probably because the game industry has more realism to their character designs than the animation industry, and it's for a very good reason. And one of them is because game needs more relatability, and so you as a player want to feel relatable to the character that you're playing. And so usually the characters that you're playing are they just look like a person, they just look like a human being, and most of the times you're only looking at their back. And so those things are some things that you need to take into account, and that's why game values relatability over particularity, meaning some of the characters, if you put like an absolute black color over them, they don't look distinct over each other. That's because they just want to look like this is a human, this is a character. You can customize it, you can relate yourself to the character way more. And game also values functionality over everything else. That functionality is very important in game, and the reason to why is because game has a lot of aspects like weapon, and the animators and the tech designers have to know how to make those things actually function. Like they have to actually know how to move it, and so some things like that limits creativity a lot. And so that's why realism is very important to game, and details are very important to the overall silhouette. Meanwhile, in animation, uniqueness and recognizability is everything. The reason to why is because in animation, animation only lasts around like 2 hours if it's a feature, right? 1 hour to 3 minutes to 2 hours. And that's not the amount of screen time that one character has. The amount of screen time that the character has is way less than 2 hours or 1 hour and 30 seconds and 30 minutes, sorry. And so that way you need a character that is very recognizable, like right at the get-go. And so this is why in animation, they really push you to make everything exaggerated. Like they want you to have very clear shape design. They want you to play with your big, medium, and small shapes, just so the moment the people see this character on screen, they don't need to take a whole lot. They don't need to take a long time to really know what this character is like. They need to immediately know, oh, this character has probably this sort of personality. They're probably this old. This is what they probably like. This is probably who they are. They need to immediately know that the moment they appear on screen. So that's something, if you really like cartoony stuff, animation is probably the industry that you need to go into. And live action is even more of a smaller industry for character design. The reason to why is because it's more, when you think about character design for live action, it's more towards costume design most of the time. And so they usually already have some of these actors in mind, and so you don't really have the chance to design this person. You just have to design the clothes that are on this person. It's a different case if it's creature design for live action. Like for example, for the movie Frankenstein or other sci-fi movies, then you may have to design those characters. Like Frankenstein, you probably need to design the monster, right? And for other live action movies like Alien and stuff like that that has humanoid creatures, you can probably design that, but it's a much more smaller niche industry and studio size. And so it's really hard to just break into that. You need to be very established, or you need to be really, really good. Or most of the case is that you need to know the director before the director gets big. And then the moment the director gets big, they just keep hiring you. Because that's what happens with production designers, costume designers, is usually the director will be working with them from when they were like really early on. And then they just will keep on working with the same exact person for the rest of their filmography. And so, yeah, these three things are just something that you need to take into account when you want to be a character designer. And so an example is this. These are different silhouettes from different characters from different industries. And some are more realistic, some are more exaggerated, but some of these are harder to guess. But I'm going to guess that when I go to the next slide, you're going to be like, okay, yeah, I know that the bunny's probably Judy Hopps, the square guy's probably SpongeBob, and the other guy on like the very far right is probably Hiccup, right? But then when I go, you're like, oh, so that's Leon. Like you probably didn't know because that's like such a generic pose from every shooting game, right? Like from any game that has like a person holding a gun, you're probably like, that's the pose that you probably see them in. If you're a crazy Resident Evil fan, you probably recognize Leon. But yeah, and this is also like that's Assassin's Creed. It's also a fairly realistic game, but now you know what I mean when I say game usually goes for more realism, while animation goes for more exaggerated shapes. And these are even more examples of what the two looks like side by side. Colors are also a thing because game, due to their genre being more into realism, their colors are usually more desaturated and more realistic. Meanwhile, in animation, it's all like these bright colors. You can see there's a lot of yellow there as well because yellow is like youth and like children and everything like that. Also, is my mic working on the Discord? Do you know? I don't know, but so functionality or rule of cool. This is something that I think about a lot. Okay. Okay. Functionality or rule of cool. This is something that I think about a lot when I first got into character design, and a lot of people ask me like, okay, where does functionality ends and where does aesthetic starts? Like why? Like where does? Because sometimes when you're creating this thing, you're like, okay, it functions, but it looks boring. So what is some degree that you can mess around with? And so something that you need to think about when you're deciding, okay, it functions, but it doesn't look cool, or like it looks cool, but the functionality doesn't really, it's not really important. So when you can think about what is your character design for? Again, like what is the industry? What industry are you trying to get into? Is it game? Is it animation? Is it film? And once you understand what industry you're going into, what is the style of that game? What is the style of that animation? What is the genre of that game? What is the genre of that animation? And all of this will inform you on how functional your design should be and how much you can be like, oh, it just looks cool and it's fine. And so an example for it is how in Assassin's Creed, there's this really specific weapon called the Hidden Blade, right? And sometimes props is so attached to a character that it's a part of the character design. So you sometimes have to design props as well. And this type of hidden blade it's very important for you to show to your 3D modelers and your animators how it works. So functionality is top priority here. And then afterwards you can think about like, okay, how do I embellish it a little bit? Another example is Hiccup's what's it called? Not fake leg, prosthetic leg. Oh my God, I feel so bad. Hiccup's prosthetic leg. And this is also where functional. Oh my God, sorry. This is where functionality is very important, is because this thing has to work. This thing has to look believable when it comes on screen. And another reason is to not only because this matters to people that, oh, that's a prosthetic leg, I know how that works. It's also because the animator needs to know how each piece works with one another and how that will support Hiccup's weight distribution. But sometimes when something is just not really used in a character or in a character design in a game or something, you can be like, okay, yeah, I know how a bow works, but I don't really know, like you don't really know the nitty gritty of it, but you design it just enough so that it's believable that it's a bow, or just enough that it's believable that it's a gun without having to really think about the tiny mechanics of it. Sometimes that's okay as well, because you're a concept artist, you're not really an engineer or a mechanic. So it's okay if there's like, oh, there's a bit of error there or something, but you need to make sure that your gun, when people see it, people know that, oh, that's a gun, that's where the bullet goes in, that's where the bullet goes out, that's how this works and that work. So yeah, so that's just something that you need to think about. That's why when you're a concept artist, it's also really important for you to look up stuff like science or anatomy or biological anatomy. I know some really good character designers actually invest in like a medical anatomy book, especially if you're a creature designer. You'd buy like a medical book about animals, just so you know like where how bone structures work or how muscle structures work. And those things are really important when you want to you need to like push and pull some of the muscles in like certain creatures that you want to design. And so this is what a character design process looks like usually. 1, you do research. 2, you do silhouettes and thumbnails. And then 3, you do refinement. 4 is color ideation. 5 is final design and render. And 6 is model sheet creation. And number 6 usually is never really talked about. But this is something that it's really important to know if you want to be hireable at a project or a studio. I'll get to that a little bit later. But this is what this is what a general character design process process looks like. However, I will say the more that you do it, the more that you know your own sort of pipeline, the more that you know which things are more comfortable for you or which things work, which things don't. It's just that when you customize your own process and when you customize your own character design pipeline, you need to remember that these things we have these sort of processes and stages because you're working with an art director. And so there's someone else at the end of the line that will be making these creative decisions for you. And what you have to do as a character designer is give them a lot of options that they can look around and pick with. And the reason to why the second step is just silhouettes and thumbnails and it's not really like detailed sketches or detailed designs is because the art director wants to see the overall design of what you're pitching. And if you give a sketch or if you give an idea that's already way too detailed or you way too thought through or you way too finalized, sometimes it's hard for the art director to be like, okay, I like this section, but I don't like the part where you did here because everything's already so detailed and then there's no enough playground for him to for them to be like, oh, maybe decrease this more, add this more, and edit some stuff. And so it's very important for you in the earlier stages to just give a rough idea or like an overall iteration of what you think that a character should look like. That's why you try to limit yourself to just silhouettes or thumbnails, because I know these two are different options because I know some people work better with shapes than they are with lines, and some people work better with lines than they are with shapes. And so it's just deciding whether or not which one is better for you to work with. However, if you work better in lines, I do still suggest you to sort of like lasso tool your design to see what the overall silhouette still looks like, because a good character design will have a really good silhouette regardless of what you do with it. And the second one is after you go through multiple stages with your art directors, be like, oh, I like this section. Can you have this hairstyle instead of that? And blah, blah, blah. The third one is refinement. So this is where you refine all the design notes and then you get to like a final design point of like, okay, this is what the character looks like. But you need to know that the refinement stage is usually still just lines. You don't really need to go into color yet, because color is a whole other variable. It's a whole other process. So you want to tackle these problems one by one, meaning it goes from line and then to color and then to final render. And after refinement, then comes the color ideation, which is different color iterations of the character that you're going. And in this color iteration, it's a whole other ideation stage. The reason to why is because you need to go through different types of color palettes, and then you need to think about values, you need to think about color symbolism, you need to think about how one color reacts to another, and all this other stuff. And then afterwards, final design and render. This is probably the part of character design that's most marketable to a lot of people. It's the one that you see a lot in art books. It's the one that you see a lot in posters. It's the one that you see artists post. It's because it looks the prettiest. It looks like the most sellable. It looks the most attractive, even though character design is literally anything before that. That's the designing process. However, a final design and a final render is still mandatory. It's still needed, because this way the character artist, if you're working on a 3D production, the character model or the character texture, the lighting artist will know how the final render of a character will look like in the production or in the film. And so they would know, oh, these types of textures is what goes in this shirt and that shirt and like whatever. And this final design is also where you can make sure that each texture and each material on your character is recognizable to one another. And so not everything looks like just flat colors. And so the 3D modeler, 3D texture artists know that, oh, that's probably made of leather. Oh, that's skin. Oh, that's hair. That's fur. And this is the part where you really make those things distinct to one another. And number 6 is model sheet creation. This is very important, especially if you're going for 2D animation or game or literally any other production. But so this is where you kind of take your character and then you think about, how will I pose them? How will they react to certain things? What is their personality? And this helps the animator to know how much they should push and pull, how the characters will react to certain things, how the characters what the characters are mostly doing with their lives. And so if your character is, for example, a detective, a lot of your poses will be about investigating, about interrogation, about like this calm composure character. And that will help the animators know, oh, this character probably wouldn't react that dramatically compared to another character who's maybe their job is like performer, and then you pose them in a certain way, and then the animator will be able to make it very distinct how these two react. And this is also the part where you create expression sheets and you create size comparisons with your other characters that you've designed. And model sheet creation is also how, if you have certain mech on your character, or you have certain props on your character, this is where you take that mech and take that prop apart and explain to the artist, hey, this is how it works. Or if you have a very complex hairstyle on your character, you can have like certain poses or certain expressions where you tell them, hey, I know this hair is complicated, this is how it will work. This is also the part where you do turnarounds, and this is something that is sometimes people are really lazy to do because it's like super tedious work, it's repetition. But turnarounds are really important, especially again, if you work in 3D or even 2D productions, because the animators and the modelers need to know how the character looks like from all angles for them to be able to move it around. Because ultimately, if you go into animation or even game, those character needs to move. And so you need to think about it in a way where this is motion, this person will be in motion. And once you understand that the character should move, this will actually influence your character designs to be significantly better, because that way you know on which part of the body you can put decoration, or you can put like certain other aspects and not block the joints that it can bend. Because like sometimes when modelers or artists look at character designs, they can complain being like, this thing can't bend because you put something on like the back of the knee and the character is supposed to be able to bend that knee. Or you put something really restrictive on the neck, even though the characters aren't injured or anything, and they should be able to move the neck part. And that makes the animators and the modelers confused on like, how does this move if you put things there? And so sometimes professors in SCAD will usually give you suggestions on like, take a 3D anim class, or like take a 2D anim class. That way you're more conscious on where to put your certain types of design when you're designing your character. And then next one is, I wanted to highlight the importance of research on the first step of character design. And a lot of times when I was doing mood boards before, just like recently, like a few months ago, when I was doing mood boards, usually what would happen is I would compile these different types of character designs that other people have made and be like, I want my character to look something like that. And I know a lot of people, or a lot of character designers also do the same thing. However, I feel like that is sometimes one of the big reasons why recent character designs look very similar to one another, is because your mood board and your research consists of already existing character designs. And so you're just taking things that are already there, things that are already existing. And something that I want you guys to remember when you get out of this meeting is, first, when you're doing your research, remember to divide it into primary, secondary, and tertiary reference. And this is something that really important that I learned in my character design class, is because primary reference is supposed to be the type of reference that you have the most of in your research section of your character design. And primary reference should always consist of photographs, function breakdowns if you're having weapons or any type of shoes or costumes that are really complicated and that I need to know where the seams are or whatever. And it should be real life actual things that you can find in this world. And your secondary ref is then your like style reference, or like, I'm designing a creature that is half horse, half person, or like I'm designing a centaur, and I want to know how other artists solves this visual problem. It's those type of reference. It's just reference on like, I really want to do this character design, but I really want to know how other people solved it beforehand and how I can maybe take from that idea, or I know which route not to go to. For example, because like maybe this certain character, maybe you're designing a vampire and you really want your character to be unique. And so you start to research what other vampire designs have been made, and that way you can be like, okay, I know not to go that way because that design style have been done before and I don't want it to look that way. There's also a nice way to do that, is in your secondary reference. And your tertiary reference should be the least amount of reference that you have. It's basically to establish aesthetic, mood, and color palettes that you'd want your character to have. And sometimes it can just be like a nothing burger photograph. It can be like, I don't know, like fire. You just put it in there, like, I want my character to be fiery. just put a fire in your reference word or something. I don't know. Or you were like, I want my character to be peaceful because they live in a barn, and so you just put like a random photo of a barn with like this really beautiful godlike sunlight in there, and you're like, there's there. I'm gonna put it in there. Oh yes.
The main reference is only for real life photographic reference.
Yes, so your main reference should be full of real life photographic references if you can't find photograph. But if it has to be like sketch documentations of like medical books or anything, that can also work. But because the reason to it is because existing character designs usually take from like cultures that are usually already explored. So like you will find a lot of character designs with Japanese culture influences or Korean culture references, but you won't find a lot of Tibetan culture references. And so if you were like, I want to make this character that comes from that part of the world, and you're losing the chance to explore other cultures that might not have been touched yet, and that is your chance to be like, oh wait, this is how they actually look like, this is how they actually work, and it will make your character design a lot more unique because you're going on the first information instead of a secondary information that has been filtered and processed by other artists. But yeah, so that's importance of research. And when you're researching and when you're creating your character and when you're firstly making like decisions on what their personality is like, on who they are, these are some questions to ask. So one, what are their main cultural influences? And I know a lot of people are like, oh, I don't think there's any main cultural influences. All your characters will always have a cultural influence. It can be like, oh, they live in modern America, then that's your cultural reference. It's modern America. You just search up what people wear in modern America or what people wear in certain types of years, and so you will always have a cultural reference. And determine where they are in the good or bad scale. So for a lot of you, you probably are very informed in like they're lawful good, they're lawful evil, they're neutral good, they're neutral evil, and stuff like that. So that range is very helpful when determining what your character is like. So think about that as well. And then another thing that's very important is you need to determine what their wants and their needs are, because that reflects how they look like as a person, and that reflects their personality. And so if they want something like they want glory, they want honor, they want recognition, usually their clothing will be very regal, right? They would have a lot of jewelry. They would want to dress fancy because they want people to recognize them. They want to be the center of attention. But if something that they want is they want to just be a good person or something like very humble, or they want to serve other people, usually their clothes will be very simple. It's very grounded. It's very maybe even desaturated and soft colors. So those are the things that you really want to think about. And another one is how old are they? And in that age, are they well? So if you have an elderly character, another homework is to think about what are some things that they can't do anymore. And how old they are will also help a lot, because then you would know like, oh, if it's a kid, then they probably wouldn't wear a 6-piece suit, right? Or like, oh, it's a kid, they probably wouldn't wear high heels. Or like, oh, this is a really elderly woman, they probably wouldn't wear stilettos, right? Or like something like that. So knowing the age of your characters is very important. And this also interacts with where they are when they are living in history. And so if probably like, oh, this is a kid, but they live in like, I don't know, 1940s or 1950s, and they probably will have to wear something like more of a suit and more like some button up or something. But then if, oh, it's a kid, but they live in 2012, then they probably wouldn't be wearing something like that. And another thing to think about is, are they feminine, masculine, or are they androgynous? And because sometimes, okay, the character goes by she, her, but they present themselves as masculine. And this is something that you need to explore as well. And another part that I think is very, very important is you need to give your characters weaknesses, and you need to know it, and you need to keep reminding yourself that they have that weakness. It's because it's very easy to give your characters strength, especially if you want your characters to be cool. Like, oh, this character can bend metal, or like this character can bend thunder and lightning. But then you sometimes forget, oh wait, what are their weaknesses, and what are the flaws to their powers, or what are the flaws to the person? Because this will help you make your character feel more realistic and relatable, and this will make your character feel believable to other people. And this actually makes your character way, way more attractive, because people are like, oh, this character is just like me. They can be the most powerful magician in the world that they live in, but they have trouble cooking. or like, I don't know, they have trouble doing taxes, right? Like, it's just something like, or they're clumsy, they slipped on a banana peel every Friday, like, you know, something like that. It's just, it could be something random, it could be something, but it just humanizes them so much more that people are like, oh wait, that's actually kind of funny, or like something like that. And again, like if the character has powers, you need to think about how they integrate it into their daily lives. So for example, my character can read people's thoughts. Okay, what is the catch to that? Like, do they have trouble sleeping because they keep hearing people's thoughts? Or like, do they get away with so many things because they can read people's thoughts? Or like, tell me how that power can affect their daily lives and how that makes them different from other people that might maybe not have that power. And then another question to ask that is like the final kicker is if you have to describe them in one sentence, what would it be? Because if you take a villain like Silco from Arcane, the one sentence to describe him wouldn't be like, he's a villain in Arcane. Like, well, yes, but like the one sentence that you would write to describe him is something more about who he is. Like, Silco is someone from Zon that desires recognition and power and you know, all these other things. And you wouldn't write villain because ultimately that one sentence will make you realize, oh, so this is who that character is. And that will make you realize the core of that character. Like, is this character a mother? Is that who they think of themselves as? Is this character more of like a fighter? Does this character dedicate their entire life to being a knight, or are they more of a brother? And so this kind of makes you, this kind of, what's it called? Sketch out their mindscape for you and makes you understand them a lot more. And this also influences your character design further on in the pipeline. And this is an example of a character design that I made and some of the real life photographic references that I used. And so the draft or the prompt that I had was this character is a rebel, it's an inventor, they're very expressive, they're very explosive, they say things that they want to say, and they have like a very strong moral compass. And immediately I was like, okay, they have to like have a really strong presence. They have to look aggressive and like maybe slightly dangerous. And so I think about some things that I want this character to have. And because I instinctively always draw male characters, I decided to be like, okay, I want this character to be a girl. But I want her to look very masculine as well. And so when I was searching, I found out that I'm leaning towards Gaelic cultures, so Scottish, Irish, and stuff like that. And they're plaids, they're Celts, and stuff like that. And I really want that. But then I stumbled upon a very similar picture of punk rock. And I was like, okay, I want to combine Gaelic culture with punk rock and see how that goes. And then I compile other images and see how that would turn out. And I eventually landed with her. And this, even though she still takes references to other existing character designs, obviously, but when I talked to my professors about it, he's like, no, she doesn't really look like too similar to any character design that he's seen. And so I immediately know, okay, that's one success that I did with this character design, is because even though I take references of like Vi and like other of these like very strong female characters, she still looks distinct from those other character designs that have been made. And so this is why it's very important to take references on photography and just real life pictures instead of just existing character designs. And some tips on approaching your character design is obviously shapes and silhouettes. This is something that you've probably all heard multiple times before. And I'll just do it again because like it's very important, because there's a reason why you keep hearing this all the time, is because this is really what it is. This is what character design is. It's just shapes and colors, bro. It's not even that deep, but you know. Some of the main three shapes are square, triangle, and circle, right? And the more the more younger your audiences are, the more your characters will probably be leaning towards just one shape. Like for example, SpongeBob is Bro's a square, right? He's a square with limbs, okay? And that's because, this is for kids, I don't know, 5 to above. People can enjoy SpongeBob on any age. And you realize that the more older the audiences for a character design is, the more complex it gets, because the more realistic the character will be. And so you see with Poe and with Stoic, it's like those two, you have two different shapes. Poe is mostly dominated by circles, but I think he has a little bit of squares in there. Stoic is mostly square, but his head is a triangle shape if you really look into it, because of like the tip of his helmet with two jutting shapes. And it's really nice when you have like one dominant shape and another shape to break that silhouette, because it creates visual interest. But if you go to more animation characters that are a lot more for like teenage audiences or like older audiences, you will see that the shapes start to get a lot more complex as they mix and match more shapes into the characters. For example, I haven't watched Goat yet, but I really like her. She's awesome. She looks really awesome to me. And you can see like her main body shape is a reverse triangle, right? She's really top heavy. She's weak and she has smaller legs, but if you really look into her, she also has a lot of circles. Her head is a circle. Her paws, like her fingers, what is it called in the like cats? You know what I mean. But those are circles. And even though her body shape is mostly reverse triangle, if you look into how they draw her muscles, how they sculpt her muscles, it's mostly just a lot of circles as well. And so it gives you, oh, this character is strong. She's probably like very dangerous and have a lot of power. But at the end of the day, she's probably a nice person. Like she's approachable. She's squishy. She's a cat. Like, and so the more you mix and match shapes, the more complex the design. But always remember to have shape repetition in your design. And so what I mean is in Poe, you can see circles are scattered everywhere. In SpongeBob, you can see that he's a square, but you can see a lot of circles also scattered everywhere. And in Stoic, you can see that he's basically a rectangle, but you can see a lot of triangles in his design. Like triangles are everywhere in his armor, in his hat, in his head, on his head. Sorry, not in his head. What the heck? Just like these shape repetitions help inform you, help make people like take a moment to be like, oh, okay, so maybe they're not as simple as they seem. And remember to keep track of your big, medium, small as well. Pick a shape that you feel like, okay, this is my big shape. This is my character's big shape. And then afterwards, okay, what's their medium? What's their small? And what their small is usually the little small trinkets that they have on their bodies. Those are their small shapes. But for example, is SpongeBob's big is he's a square, right? And then his medium is that he has circles. And then his small, like really, really tiny, is that he has just a little bit of triangle on his tie. And that's where it helps people group things, and it helps keep the character feel more compact and complete. And posing and expression. And so posing is very important, especially when you reach that final design refinement and that final rendering stage, is because posing helps clarify the shape language of your character, and it also adds personality to the character design, and it helps clarify silhouette as well. Another really important note that you can think about when you're posing your characters is to make sure your limbs are separated from your body. So for example, with the more realistic the character is, sometimes the posing aren't too exaggerated, like with Vi. But if you go to like more simplified characters like Fear, you can see that the posing is very exaggerated with like the slouched pose. And then, but the thing is, if I put everything in black, you would know the personality of these characters. You're like, oh, Tigress is confident. She's confident in her skill. She's confident in herself. Fear is afraid, right? He's slouching. He wants to disappear. Oh my God, Hobie Brown, Spider-Punk, is very relaxed. He's very like, I can do whatever I want from his pose. Wolf is very confident, but he's also more relaxed, sort of like trickster kind of confident. Vi is ready to hit you in the jaw if she has to. Like all these other things, it helps give that character a lot more personality, and it helps clarify like who they are as a person, like what kind of emotion probably is very present in their life. Like Vi probably has a lot of anger, right? Fear has a lot of fear. And then Tigress has a lot of confidence, determination, and like these grounded values. And so posing is also very important, as well as expression, because you can have a very confident pose, and then people will look at your expression and see that you're afraid, and you're like, oh, this person is probably forced to fight. And so those things are very nice to play with and think about when you do your character designs. And then color and values. These are some things that took me a lot, because I'm not the best with colors. I will just admit I am very weak in colors. I don't know why. I hate it that I'm weak in colors, but I am. But colors and values, an advice that changed how I approach character design. is that when you're doing character design, keep or restrict the most high contrast values around the face. The reason to why is because when you look at from afar, when high contrast means attention, right? When you will pay attention to something that has more high contrast. And so if you restrict the areas of higher contrast and values to the areas of the face, people will immediately look at your characters to their face. And so that's why if your characters are like, if they have high contrast in their waist area, maybe don't do that because then people will just look at their crotch. Those are some things to think about. Did you have your hand up?
Where did you find them? And then on the look, right?
On the right, that one. I found it on Google, but it's simplified Overwatch characters.
I've seen that before.
Yeah, it's a really helpful image because that breaks down the 60-30-10 ratio that I was going to talk about next as well. So then the good thing about a 60-30-10 ratio is that it keeps you accountable of all the colors that you've picked for your characters. And so in the simplified Overwatch characters that you see in the right is that you can see, like Reaper is probably mostly black, right? Like you can see that. It's your favorite character.
It's not.
It's not? Okay, never mind. Oh, it's Hanzo, never mind. Oh, it's not. Who is it? Oh, it's your...
Do your meeting, bro.
Okay, sorry, I got distracted. It's the pink guy. Anyway, but you can see you can see there that the 60% is the black, the 30% is the hot pink, and the 1% is the face. But because that 10% is restricted to the face, you immediately look at his face when you look at the guy. And then the other ones also, if you see, a lot of the higher contrast values are around the facial area. And so just think about what are some things that are very bright on, maybe if you have like a darker complexion character, something that would be like, add a jewelry, like put silver earring, give him a silver earring. Immediately that's like, you look at the person's face and like just think about stuff like that might elevate your character design more. And another thing is contrast and comparison. Sometimes when you're designing just a singular character, you're like, okay, this person is skinny, but why don't they feel skinny? It doesn't feel skinny until you put that very skinny character beside a character that's like really, really big. And then you're like, oh, they're skinny. Like you get the idea. And this is really important for you to remember, is because when you're designing a character, you're like, oh, I need to push it more. It's not really clear enough. But sometimes your character is already at a point you want it to be. It's just because you don't have the context of the people around them. And so putting like a character that's a bigger size, that's a different shape than the character that you're designing, helps clarify that who this character is because ultimately your character don't exist by itself. Your character lives in a community, it lives with other people. And so the shapes and the sizes of the other characters that you design also helps inform who your main character or the character that you're designing are. Just remember to do a lot of variety when you're creating character designs, especially for animation. Again, it might not always be the case for games, because games can be a lot of just it looks like a real life person with different bunch of costumes. The most that you can do is probably exaggerate on the costumes, but you also need to think about functionality again. Again, that's like a whole different other world to explore to, but just remember variety and remember contrast and comparison between one character and the next. And so that's probably the end of my meeting. I'm sorry, that's probably like a lot of like info dump, but yeah, it's now the ground's open for Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to shout it out in the chat or raise your hand right now. But yes, the meeting's over. Thank you. Okay, yeah. Can you go back to the color value slide? Yes, I can. Yes, here it is. Oh, you have a question? Yes.
So I was curious when you said like every character is inspired by some kind of culture. The thing I struggle a lot with that is like if my character is in a fantasy world or a world that doesn't like exist anywhere in like a modern day, how do you integrate that culture without it feeling like out of place? Like, you know what I mean? Like, how do you decide that?
I think if your character's in a fantasy world and you're like, how do I integrate culture in it? You need to first think about, if it's a fantasy, then they probably live within a kingdom or a village, right? And you probably need to think about, oh, is this kingdom based on like middle-aged England? Or is this village based on like middle-aged Ireland or something? That's culture. That way you can be like, oh, I should introduce, the armor of my fantasy characters probably takes into the armor of middle-aged Ireland. And that way you can restrict yourself from being over like, this is based on Ireland, but then the armor is suddenly from like, I don't know, from England, or maybe something far away from Germany or something like. Because if you look into it, armor looks very different in the back days based on where you are in the world, and so it's very easy to be like just accidentally drawing of armor that's probably distinctly French in an environment that you want to be culturally influenced by something that's like German. So just stuff like that. But there's always a cultural influence that keeps designs grounded. Because if you don't have that cultural influence, sometimes it's very easy to be like, I want this to look like, I want this to look like that. And then suddenly everything just feels like it's fabricated and it doesn't feel like believable, if you know what I mean. But yes, that's probably how I would go about it.
Okay, that's good to know.
Okay, you can tell they. Yes. Are there any other questions that you guys want to ask? Yes.
Like tips for like if you struggle with like getting like big shape language, because I feel like I think too realistically when I design the character, like proportion wise.
Do you want to go into animation or games?
So I don't know.
Okay, that makes sense. But yeah, honestly, it's just very safe to have like that shape language. But a tip that I would have is probably just when you're doing your silhouettes and your thumbnails, make sure you're drawing small instead of big. And so when you're drawing small, it forces you to just think about in big shapes. Because if you look at things further away, things get blurry, like you don't really get to find out the details and you can see them as like one block of shape. And so drawing small kind of helps you be like, okay, this person is like really bulky, then it's probably a triangle. And so that makes you focus on like the chest area more. And another tip that I would do is because I also struggle on exaggeration because I usually just draw really realistic characters anyway. One thing that I would do is like once I get a really good, like a nice sketch that I like, okay, so this is what the character looks like overall. I take the character and then I use either the liquify tool or I play around with the lasso tool and just like, okay, he's strong. And so I just like lasso the chest and like make it like big and like make the legs small. And I'm like, okay, that looks really funky, but then at least I have a shape that's exaggerated. And then I take that and I just draw on top of that to refine some of more anatomical issues. But that way I would have eliminated all these other details and all these other same, sizes and just make one thing the focus. Does that help? Okay. Of course. Does anyone have any other questions? No worries if not. We can all just go home. Oh, wait. Oh. Do you have any suggestions on having variety in your character sizes and being mindful of not having your characters all be the same shape? About character variety and character shapes, a suggestion that I would have is also, hi, Taylor. How's France? Anyway, because she's in Lacoste. Anyway, a suggestion that I would make on this sort of issue is you have to look at your character lineup and think about, do they have the problem of one having this similar personalities? Because sometimes when I'm doing a character design and I find out, oh, they kind of look the same to one another. And then when I really think about it, like, wait, they actually kind of act the same way. And that's usually also one of the problems why some characters look the same with one another is because they don't really have distinct personalities between one and the other character. And so if you really think about that first, that kind of helps you put in the mindscape of, I need to differentiate my characters or I need to make my characters different people. And because the moment where you have characters that are distinct to one another, like one person is like very brave and very strong, another is like very shy and like cowardly and timid, it's easier for you to be like, okay, this one I'm going to exaggerate to more of a square triangle shape. This other one I will be more squiggly and like small, because that way it'll be easier for you to exaggerate shapes. Because when you listen to some words, for example, like strength, power, the thing that comes into your head is like, okay, I'm thinking about like a tank, like a hammer. And if you look at all these objects, you kind of figure out, oh, these objects have very square shapes. They're very bulky. They're very cubey. And then you're like, okay, my character should have the distinct shape of a, hold on. Distinct shape of a square. And then you take your character that's like more sad and more timid, and you're like, okay, what are some creatures that are shy and timid? And then you find out like, oh, these creatures are small. You think about children, you think about babies, and you think about like maybe mice or like small worms or like critters. And then you think about, oh, they have like this very swoopy shape. And then you're like, okay, my character should look like that. Because these type of symbolism, this type of like similarities, what's it called, activate something in people's brains. And that way, that's how you can go about like maybe differentiating your character shapes and sizes. Yes.
I was just gonna say like an example of like within an archetype you can switch up how a character looks, like maybe Vi and Savika from Arcane, like they're
Yeah.
adult women, but they're
Yeah,
very different.
they do. Yeah, that's a really good
Like,
example.
push the shapes a lot.
So Victoria just gave an example of Vi and Savika. Those are two very similar women, but is approached very differently. And so that's something that. Okay. Of course, Taylor. Okay, you mentioned draw as small, and this part I kind of struggle. If I'm done the whole pose shape design, I need to focus on detail. Should I zoom into the part? Like zoom into the head, chest part, but not zoom into the microscope, or still try to keep the scale that can see the whole body. So drawing small should be restricted to the thumbnail and the silhouette phase. When you're already coming into like refinement stage, you should make your drawing slightly bigger, just so you can have a lot more play area to like make parts distinct to one another, and to clarify what are the bigger props that they are wearing in the body. And in general, zooming into pieces, I would actually ask you to restrict yourself from zooming in to your workplace when you're designing your characters in any part of the stage, unless you're already in the rendering stage, because rendering is just a whole other thing. You kind of have to zoom in sometimes. But when you're designing your character, try to restrict yourself from zooming in too much, because that way you can always be very aware of where details are and where things should relax. Because when you zoom in, it's very easy to put details on areas that you think should relax. Like, for example, you want a lot of the focus to be on the face. And so you would put a lot of details on the face and restrict yourself from putting details on the pants. But if you zoom in, you sometimes will give details on the pants that are like distracting now. And the thing is, a whole bunch of details on a character sometimes make it look like there's nothing on the character. And so less is a lot more. And so that's what I would say is just like restrict yourself from zooming in anyway. But if you have to zoom in, restrict that to the refinement stage. Does that help? I don't know. Cool. Okay, yay. Yay. All right. Does anyone else here have any questions before we have like 3 minutes? I think we're. Yay, okay. So if you guys are good, you guys are free to go. Thank you so much for coming into this meeting. Remember that the contest is next week. And if you're interested in getting an art book, go to the contest. Yay.